Also with us is Tara Karta, Director of CLAWS. We have Wael Awad, Senior Journalist, joining us, and Veena Sikri, former diplomat, also with us on the show. Let me come across you first. Mr. Sajjanhar, very, very significant statement, and I think perhaps the most significant part of this is the fifth paragraph of the Indian statement, the Indian readout, which says that PM noted that India and China both pursue strategic autonomy. Their relations should not be seen through a third country's lens. The two leaders deemed it necessary to expand common ground on bilateral, regional and global issues and challenges like terrorism and fair trade in multilateral platforms. A lot that's been said in those few sentences, Mr. Sajjanhar, but to begin with, even though India may have distanced from it, obviously there will be a lot of inferences drawn as to the implication of all of this happening in the backdrop of US tariffs and the kind of, many would say, offensive statements coming in from the side of senior officials in Washington, D.C. as well.
Thank you very much, Madhav, for having me. You're very right. I think this is a very seminal statement because, since it was announced that Prime Minister Modi would be participating in the Shanghai Cooperation Organization Summit, and, it had been the whole issue of the invitation and Prime Minister's response had been, left hanging in the air without a decision being taken. And when it came, it was thought that possibly part of it could be a response to the pushback that India is receiving on the issue of tariffs from the United States. India has, however, made it clear that the meeting between Prime Minister Modi and Mr. Xi Jinping is a continuation of the Kazan process that was set in motion last October in Russia, and that it is in the interest of both the countries, of the region and of the world, for these two large populous countries, big territories, big economies, big militaries, to have normal and stable ties with each other. But, as Madhav, the rhetoric from senior officials, Peter Navarro, Besant and Marco Rubio and some of the others, that has got shriller by the day. People had started saying that, India will get into much a closer partnership with China. But I think this has been made very clear that we have to move very cautiously, we have to move slowly, and we are trying to basically bring back the relationship as it existed in the pre-Galwan days. And I think that is what Prime Minister has said.
Okay.
We take forward our partnership on the basis of the three mutuals.
Okay. Let me quickly bring in some of our other panelists as well, please. Veena Sikri, I would like you to come in on this. For India and China, the biggest really issue will be, how things play out as far as the border is concerned. Now, there have been several rounds of talks. There has been disengagement at the border. China, for its own part, says that they've resolved their land border issues with several of their neighbors. However, the story when it comes to their maritime borders and other ambitions, of course, is very well known. So how serious is China in this case in terms of resolving this issue once and for all?
Well, I think for India, this is certainly the most important red line. I think when Foreign Minister Wang Yi was in Delhi a few weeks ago, this was very clearly stated in all his meetings, including the meeting, of course, with NSA, Mr. Ajit Doval, and with External Affairs Minister Dr. Jaishankar. Everywhere, this was the bottom line. Now, it is true that after the meeting between Prime Minister Modi and President Xi Jinping in Kazan last year at the BRICS summit in Russia, there was movement on this, and there was a little bit of withdrawing of the face-to-face confrontation and, of course, agreement on patrolling, Tepsang, Demchok and all that. But the point is that how far has this consolidated? And the talk when Foreign Minister Wang Yi was here was on the question of disengagement, moving troops away to create an area of peace. In Pangong, so the discussion was that from the finger number 8, there will be the Chinese, finger number 4, this side will be the Indians, etc., to create a kind of a buffer zone. All this were the various, discussions that were being talked about in the media. Now, I think that there's not much yet on this, whether this has consolidated, whether this is taking place side by side. But we do know that this is a very, very important aspect for India, because we had said and have said always that unless there's peace and tranquility on the borders, the relationship cannot progress. the agreements India and China had were being observed until the Galwan episode in 2020, and since then we are trying to get back to a situation where again the situation of peace and tranquility is observed. So I think this is an important point, and if this is worked out, this is consolidated, the agreement on the disengagement and so on, I think that all the other aspects could very well fall into place. The trade, the economic cooperation. We do know on trade we have a huge issue of the $100 billion trade deficit for India, and certainly that is something that we have to both work on. We have to work on it within India.
Absolutely.
We have to work on it with China, and this is a very important aspect. I would also draw attention to a very interesting meeting that Prime Minister had in Tianjin after the meeting with President Xi Jinping, which was a meeting with Shai Qi, which is a very important leader he's a member of the Standing Committee of the Politburo of China, and also a person who works very closely with President Xi Jinping, like he's the head of the CCP organization, So I think that this is very interesting. It hasn't normally happened before that, you have, in addition to the meeting with President Xi Jinping, you also have another meeting at the same time in very close proximity with such a senior member, a member of the Standing Committee, the Politburo. I think this is very interesting because there is so much talk in China about that, about what is going to be the role of Xi Jinping.
Absolutely. We'll come across to who all he's meeting. In fact, there's a bilateral in a short while from now with Myanmar, as well as tomorrow's big meeting with President Putin as well. That's going to be looked at very closely. But I just want to bring in Tara Kartar. I want to draw your attention to the third paragraph, which deals with this issue of the border. The Prime Minister underlined the importance of peace and tranquility in border areas for continued development of bilateral relations. The two leaders noted with satisfaction the successful disengagement last year and the maintenance of peace and tranquility along the border area since then. They expressed commitment to a fair, reasonable and mutually acceptable resolution of the boundary question, proceeding from their political perspective of the overall bilateral relations and the long-term interests of the two peoples. Now, what are we looking at, Tara Karta? Because a lot of this sounds very technical. Are we looking at a thinning out of, the Chinese army, the Chinese defense services on their side? What are we looking at in terms of what is expected literally on ground as far as the border is concerned?
Right now, as the previous speaker said, this is a takeoff from Wang Yi's the joint statement, right? But the important thing there was the clause which said early harvest in terms of settling the India-China border, which means the entire India-China border. So that is quite a jump. Will it immediately result in thinning of troops? That will depend on talks between the expert groups. It will probably not happen in a hurry because these things have to be structured in a very careful manner, depending on the topography, depending on where your own, your troops are in rear areas. So all of that matters. But I think the foundation is this. If we have to build our ties with China, until that dispute they've resolved with everybody else. At least on the land borders, like you said, we need some very, very clear forward movement here. And we've taken that first step, and so have they. That is the bottom line, and that is what he's talking about in this meeting. And that was clearly the prep for the Prime Minister to go. If that hadn't taken place with Wang Yi earlier, I don't know whether the Prime Minister would even have gone, because this is extremely important to us.
Absolutely. And let me bring in Wael Awad on that note. Wael Awad, settling the border entirely, the issues relating to the border is, of course, a big step. But given the kind of things that we're seeing on ground, the Kailash, Mansarovar Yatra starting, direct flights resuming, certainly things appear to be moving in that direction, would you say?
Well, I think it has been coming back into the normal track between the two giant states of Asia and the largest democracy in the world, India, where it is joining hand with the Chinese. And I think these are the confidence building measure which has already been promoted by the prime ministers and also by the president of the China, Xi Jinping. Having said that, I would say that there is a willingness among the top leaders to settle issues before we see the public domain, how this relation can be built up. And I think the domestic compulsion of the Prime Minister of India as well, being a democratic state, he needs more also to address his audience in India, that he needs some assurances from the Chinese side that China will be respecting the border between India and there is no sizing of the borders or any activities that can erupt or can provoke India. So I think these are the issues has to be addressed. And I am happy to hear the Prime Ministers and both the leaders are saying the same language. When we traveled with the late Prime Minister Atal Bihari Vajpayee to China in 2005 and also with the Prime Minister late Manmohan Singh, we heard that the world is large enough to accommodate both the giants of Asia. And I think if we talk of the Asian centuries, we have to address these are the type of leader. They should be taking this historic movement, especially at this time of juncture of the history of the geopolitical changes and that the changes taking place in the world, that we should see these leaders are able to address the aspiration of their people, because it is an Asian century and we have to address the Asian people. What exactly we want, the South-South voice has to be heard by the North. And unless and until these leaders can utilize such kind of platform, SCO, BRICS, then we will not be able to see them on the platform of the new world order.
All right. Let me bring in fact, our panelists on this as well. And in fact, Ashok Sajana, I want you to come in on this because the very fact that Trump has, expressed his desire that he would not be participating in Quad later this year, it was scheduled to take place in New Delhi in the backdrop of what has transpired. Are we looking at a shift? Are we looking at a shift as far as India's own importance, according more importance to BRICS perhaps than Quad? Is that the new reality that we are faced with?
I think Quad is very important for India, and I think India has invested very heavily. Also, the other countries have invested very heavily, even whether it's Japan or it's Australia, I think, because this is the region in which all of us are living, whether, as far as South China Sea, East China Sea, that is with Japan and Australia. But as far as the Indian Ocean is concerned, that is our home turf as far as India is concerned. So, peace and security and stability there is very important. And that is what Quad had been put in place for. And it was actually Mr. Trump's idea. And when, the first foreign ministers meeting of the Quad took place on the 21st of January, the first day after Trump was sworn in, it was thought that Trump wanted to invest more energy and give it more traction. But now it seems to be the case. Now, my point would be, Madhav, that if Trump does not come, frankly, the Quad summit, in my view, will not take place. We could, going forward, we could have a look at it, but I don't think it will have much significance, much relevance, because, and this would be giving great energy and enthusiasm to China. Because China at that time, you would recall, had said, it was Wang Yi who said, that it is a bubble on the surface of the ocean. It's froth and it's going to disappear. Right. We don't want it to disappear. We want, let better times come, and I'm sure better times, because, India-US relations are too important to allow them to sort of, just slither away like this.
I'm going to ask all my guests to stay on with us. Let's first listen into what the Prime Minister said as far as his opening remarks were concerned, where he welcomed the restart of the Kailash Mansarovar Yatra and the direct flights between the two nations.
Excellency, हमारे गृहमंत्री से मेरे स्वागत के लिए मैं आपका हृदय से आभार व्यक्त करता हूँ। पिछले वर्ष कल्याण में हमारी बहुत ही सार्थक चर्चा हुई। हमारे संबंधों को एक सकारात्मक दिशा मिली। सीमा पर डिसएंगेजमेंट के बाद शांति और स्थिरता का माहौल बना हुआ है। हमारे स्पेशल रिप्रेजेंटेटिव्स के बीच बॉर्डर मैनेजमेंट के संबंध में सहमति बनी। कैलाश मानसरोवर यात्रा फिर से शुरू की। दोनों देशों के बीच डायरेक्ट फ्लाइट भी फिर से शुरू की जा रही है। हमारे सहयोग से दोनों देशों के 2.8 बिलियन लोगों के बीच जुड़े हुए। इससे पूरी मानवता के कल्याण का मार्ग भी प्रशस्त होगा। परस्पर विश्वास, सम्मान और संवेदनशीलता के आधार पर हम अपने संबंधों को आगे बढ़ाने के लिए प्रतिबद्ध हैं। एजेंसी चीन द्वारा एससीओ की सफल अध्यक्षता के लिए मैं आपको बहुत बहुत बधाई देता हूं। एक बार फिर चीन यात्रा के निमंत्रण के लिए और आज की हमारी बैठक के लिए आपका हार्दिक धन्यवाद।
All right, I'm going to request all our panelists to stay on with us. We're slipping into a very quick break. More news, more updates, and all the analysis right here on Times Now.